Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Buber, the Viennese-born Jewish philosopher, had a great influence on personalist thinking. In his fundamental work, I and Thou, for the Germans, Ich und Du, he wrote the following: in the beginning is relationship. All true life is encounter. It is encounter which creates, with the presence of the other, the reality of time as present. I become myself in contact with you. I become myself in contact with you. I become I by saying you. This is in a nutshell the essence of my thinking, my personalist approach for a very long time. In placing the emphasis on the other, it is not the other as an individual that I am interested in, but the other as a person whom, in Christian terms, I call neighbor, my neighbor. The individual characteristically defines himself by reference to what is not himself. His approach is to isolate himself, to think in terms of isolation voluntarily chosen. Taken to extremes, the isolated individual tends to think that the world began when he was born, and that the future of the world will be linked to this own future. You have two approaches. You have Ich und Du, I and Thou, and you have we and they, the other ones. Conversely, the person is profoundly and essentially a being of relationship. The person is a being who shows solidarity. This does not prevent him from being fully himself, both solitary and in solidarity. To take the title of a speech I gave at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, also organized by the Jesuits, what a coincidence. The person is thus fully both solitary and possessed of fellow feeling. His solitude is not isolation. You will have understood that it is in the light of this philosophy of relationship, this philosophy of encounter, that I wish to see Europe's destiny unfold. For me, Europe means friendship, relationship too. Some may think me naive after 30 years or 40 years in politics, but was the first Franco-German treaty not a friendship treaty? Let us now extrapolate the concepts of individual and person to the whole of society. We end up with political ideas expressed on the one hand in populism and inward looking, and on the other hand in solidarity, a sense of responsibility and openness to the world. In the course of its history, Europe has often hesitated between these two approaches. To mention only the last century, nations and peoples were tempted by experiments in ultranationalism. Nationalism is not a homogeneous concept. In ultranationalism, National Socialism, Fascism and Communism, which were all driven by a desire to distance oneself from the other or even exclude the other. I tremble at the thought of the horrors we endured, and I think of the millions of people who were tortured and killed. Those millions are not just statistics for me. Each of them is a person, one by one. Famous definition of Archer Kastler. A man or a woman is not a million divided by a million. Happily, those same nations and peoples then return to the source of mankind's greatness. That is to say, essential human values expressed in the beginning with Christian Democrat, Social Democrat, or liberal nuances. Fortunately, Society and man do not live out the same values in the same way. And in a democratic society, the emphasis can and must vary. But while the mode of expression may vary, the values themselves do not change. They are drawn from the depths of that which confers greatness of man and enables him to reach his full potential. Those values include human rights, equality between men and women, justice, the common good, responsibility and solidarity. Another such value is secularism, or what is called in French laïcité, in the narrowest sense of the word. It is distinguishing clearly between what is out to Caesar and what is out to God. In short, values which are Catholic, with a small c, I apologize, universal and capable of being universalized. Values which are rooted firmly in European culture, a culture forged over the centuries by a Judeo-Christian world, Greek and Latin thought, and more recently humanism and enlightenment. Values which form our heritage, a heritage which must render fruitful through tireless application, as the famous French poet Boileau said. Let me be clear. In speaking of a retreat into one's own identity, I am not, of course, denying anyone the right to have an identity, or rather identities. I myself am personally and indeed intimately acquainted with someone who defines himself as a resident of St. Genesius-Rode, a child born in Brussels, Etterbeek, not far from here, Flemish by language and culture, and both Belgian and European through his membership of a community of destiny. Being European does not therefore entail a blind belief in the possible emergence of a European per se. It is someone who identifies himself or herself primarily as a European. Moreover, I believe that the future of the European Union lies in its acceptance of a European identity defined as an identity of spirit, feeling, and indeed destiny, rather than one based on Fortress Europe. This is an identity defined not negatively in comparison to the others, but positively. To that extent, I feel European, but have no desire to be submerged in an amorphous community or a melting pot. That is something which does not appeal either to me personally or to Europeans in general, since such an exclusive identity would run counter to the very idea of Europe and European civilization, as it has developed over the course of the centuries. We need to belong to smaller groups, such as a family, a neighborhood, a circle of friends, a local community, a people, or a country, in order to have some sense of stability. At the same line, however, we also need ideas and ideals which transcend the individual. The words do not matter as long as it can be translated into reality. But can men seek or indeed find an added dimension, such transcendence in religion, I here to ask? For many of us, the answer is yes. And the fact that the Chapel of the Resurrection, Chapel of Europe, whose 10 years anniversary we are all celebrating today, stands in such close proximity of the European institutions, reflects both a geographical and spiritual closeness. Others will find this added dimension in non-religious spirituality or philosophy, or even if it is atheist in nature. Whatever the case, we must embark on a journey in search of this extra something. French is much more beautiful. Un supplément d'âme. Which is within us and just waiting to be revealed. We must seek a purpose in life in general and in our own lives in particular. Such a purpose will never be found in the ego. It resides in the other, remember Buber, and or in our relations with the others. By embarking on such a search, each in our own individual way, we can bring to the community of Europe this added dimension, which will eventually turn it into a union in the sense of the word. In fact, I would prefer to use the original term, European community, rather than union, since this original founding term has more human connotations. A union, not a unity. And here I would put forward the same argument as that expounded with regard to the European identity. For unity is static, while a union is dynamic and evokes the relations arising from an ongoing process. A union, therefore, in the sense of understanding, harmony, concord, and peace. And indeed, if there is one value above all others, which has enabled the European Union to last as long as it has, it is that of peace. After more than 1500 years of fratricidal wars and an almost endless list of peace treaties broken in quick succession, and following the destruction of Europe in the 2 world wars, the continent's rebirth, and I deliberately choose the word of blood being shed. This is a major achievement. Many nations have entered this alliance over the past 60 years, while its borders have grown ever wider, and the list of countries knocking on its door is getting longer each year. For the new member states, memories of war are fresher than for us here in Western Europe. For them, the Cold War did not end until 1989. And for those living in the Western Balkans, the experience of civil war and genocide is still painfully recent. All this is Europe. A new form of governance is emerging, and is one in which I have been heavily involved for more than 2 years now. Admittedly, the process may seem slow, for we are not rushing to build a union founded on sand. Rather, we are moving forward in small steps, laying down one stone after another in order to construct, slowly but surely, an edifice as solid as a cathedral. And what form will this cathedral or temple of Europe ultimately take? It is up to you, the men and women of the European Union. For the European Union's response could take the same form as the words uttered by God to Moses through by burning bush. Ayez, Acher, ayez. I will be all that you make me be. We, the European Union, will be all that you, the men and women of Europe, make us be. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.